Today we're going to talk about color theory in general and focus on warm and cool color use. So some terms you need to know in regards to color theory. First of all, pure colors. Pure colors, there's nothing added to them. A tint is a pure color with white added to it. A tone is a color with gray added. And a shade is a color with black added. Now we're going to be using the subtractive color mode in this discussion. There's also the additive color mode, and in the additive color mode there's different primary colors. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to stick with subtractive color. So the primary colors used in subtractive color mode are yellow, red, and blue. You cannot mix these colors from other colors. That's why they're primary. Secondary colors are orange, violet, and green. You create these colors by mixing the primary colors. Now, tertiary colors are colors that skew towards one direction. So we have yellow-green, yellow-orange, red-orange, red-violet, blue-violet, and blue-green. Now, there's various types of color combinations that you can create when studying color theory. What I recommend that you do is purchase a color wheel. I've been painting for years and designing for years, and I still keep a color wheel in my studio. But this is just a sampling of what you can do with the color wheel and in finding out color combinations. Inherent value. Every color has a related value. This is referred to as inherent value. Here's an example of the relationship of color and its value. Next to each color tile is its value. Notice how the green and the red in this example have the same value. This is these particular hues of red and green. So you're not going to get this with every red and green, but if you get the right hue of each color, you're going to get the same inherent value. Often when people see inherent value of pure colors for the first time, they're surprised at how dark those values actually are. So when we look at the red and the green, we can see that it's really kind of a medium value of gray if we look at the inherent values. So just a nice fact. Another thing, knowing the inherent value is important. If you design a piece with similar values, and if it's duplicated in grayscale, you can see what you end up with. The photo on the left is a photo of the traditional, I can't think of the poinsettias. And yet when you strip out all the color, it looks like this woman is kind of in a sea of gray. So inherent can become important if you know that your work will be stripped down to grayscale. Saturation or purity, they're pretty much the same term. Saturation is the intensity and pureness of a given hue. Another way to think of this is the brightness or dullness of a color. As a color becomes desaturated, it becomes more gray. So we've got a pure color here, and it's desaturating as we go along. Complementary contrasts. Complementary colors are opposite one another on the color wheel, and they represent the highest form of color contrast that you can get from the color harmonies. If you select equal valued and saturated complementary colors, the hues may appear to vibrate. This is actually happening in the eye, and I must say that not everyone experiences vibration, color vibration. If you have a client and they're telling you that you've got a color combination going on that's creating a vibration and you don't see it, take them at their word. All you need to do is change the purity of one of those colors or the value of one of those colors, and you will probably cut out the vibration. The concept of complementary contrasts was first developed by Leonardo da Vinci. Colors affected by other colors. Each color is affected by the colors surrounding it. For example, if you want blue to appear bluer, surround it with a complementary color, its complementary color of orange. If you want a warm color to appear warmer, surround it by cooler colors. After images are also known to happen with this color interaction, and yet we learn to tune them out. For more on this concept of after images, please watch the video or read my blog on value. Every color theory book will tell you that warm colors advance and cool colors recede. But let's take this a step further. What this is actually telling you is that you see warm colors before you see cool colors. Keep this in mind, though. Your eye first sees yellow, then it sees orange, red, yellow, green, green, blue, and violet. This is physics, pure and simple, and it happens so quickly that the viewer is often unaware of it. Being aware of this concept while creating a design helps the artist to create visual movement. I also would like to interject that you'll notice that with the exception of the yellow-green, I'm mentioning only pure colors. Yellow-green is a tertiary color. I'm sorry, I'm mentioning only primary and secondary colors. Yellow-green is a tertiary color. Actually, the tertiary colors fit into this concept, but to make life simpler, we're going to stick with just the one tertiary color of yellow-green, and I will be talking about that later in the video. Please note also that what I'm talking about applies to things that are done in print, in paint, etc., and so forth. We're not talking about color and light. For example, think of a police car and its lights. The idea is that when in use, you need to see those lights, even if it's a bright sunny day. The reason, and you'll see they're usually blue, white, and red, but they have a strobe to them too. Now, when we add the strobing to it, that alters how we perceive color. So again, I'm talking about things like print, paint, etc., and so forth. So to make this concept work of seeing colors in certain orders, you need to have two things in place. The first thing you need to have is there needs to be a noticeable difference between the purity of the main color and the colors surrounding it. So if you look in this example below, I have a pure red, blue, and the color surrounding it is a tint of violet. So it's purple with white added to it. The piece next to it, the main color is a tone of blue, so it's blue with gray mixed to it. And it's surrounded by a pure green. So in this case, we are seeing, this is working over here, and this is not working because there is not a noticeable difference in the purity of the main color and the colors surrounding it. And also, so you can see below, this is what these two colors look like. The second thing that you need to have in place is there needs to be a noticeable difference between the value of the colors surrounding it. So in both cases, I have pure yellow, but there isn't a great deal of difference between the value between this yellow, this pure yellow, and this tint of yellow behind it. As you can see down here, this is this tile with the color stripped out. This is the inherent value of it. We have the same hue of yellow here, but it's surrounded by a shade of blue. And when we strip the color out and look at the inherent value, you can see how much that yellow just pops out. So, to repeat, the second thing you need to have in place to make this concept work is there needs to be a noticeable difference between the value of the main color and the colors surrounding it. So, which color do you see first? If I'm in a class, I'm going to pause the video at this moment and take your response. So first, let's look at that first color. It's actually a tone of orange, okay? So we would normally call that brown, but it's really an orange-based color. So going back to the original thing, I'm assuming that most of you correctly said that you're seeing this color first. Well, this is a yellow-green. So why are you seeing the yellow-green before you're seeing the orange? And again, to remember, we see colors this way: yellow, orange, red, yellow-green, green, blue, and violet. So technically, orange should be the color we would see first. But in this case, what's happening is the inherent value of that color is dark. And now let's take a look at this tile with all the colors stripped out. So you can see that the value between the surrounding color and the tone of orange and the difference between the value between the yellow-green, which is pure, and the color surrounding it, there's a greater difference between these two values. Plus, this is a pure color and this is not. So this is why you need to have the purity of the color, of the main color, needs to be purer than the colors surrounding it. And there needs to be a noticeable difference between the value of the main color and the colors surrounding it. So high color contrast and value. You can have high color contrast, which is what we've been talking about, and high contrast value. Both high color contrast and high contrast value have a lot of movement and energy. The example on the left is high color contrast. On the right, it's the same piece that's been converted into grayscale, or the inherent value, showing that it is high contrast value as well. So these two concepts can work together. But in the case of high color contrast, you don't have to have high contrast value to get all that movement. Here's an example we've seen before. Again, if you've watched my video on value, you've seen this. And this is actually a key. This is not a high contrast value. And you can see when this piece has the color stripped out, how much of the very dark values actually exist in the overall piece. But he is using high contrast colors. So this is how he's getting all this marvelous movement. Now let's look at yellow-green. In the value video and blog, we looked at after images where we discussed how colors affect the colors surrounding it. We also explored how to make warm colors appear warmer and cool colors appear cooler. Let's revisit those concepts with the color yellow-green. Yellow-green is a tertiary color, meaning a color made of combining secondary and primary colors. Tertiary colors behave like warm colors or cool colors depending on the type of colors that surround it. We'll be concentrating on yellow-green as it's really right in the middle of that contrast color spectrum. So, to make a color appear warm, place a cooler color around it, such as green, blue, or violet. To make a color appear cooler, place a warmer color around it, such as yellow, orange, or red. So when yellow-green is surrounded by a warmer color, in this case I've got yellow, what's happening is the yellow that surrounds the yellow-green is pushing the green out in the yellow-green. When I surround yellow-green with a cooler color, it's doing the opposite thing. In this case, I've got it surrounded with blue, and what it's doing is it's pushing the yellow out in the yellow-green. And this also works with other tertiary colors to varying degrees. So, why are these concepts important? How can these concepts work to your advantage? Let's say you need some text to stand out from the rest of the layout. Using a warmer, pure, saturated hue of text placed on a background that is high in contrast, value contrast from the text hue, will automatically draw the viewer's eye to that text. For an added effect, the background color could be cool. Let's take a look at some examples of how artists have used this concept to their advantage. The work we're looking at was created in the early part of the 20th century. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, color theory was quickly developing while incorporating science. When looking at this work, don't underestimate what these artists were doing. They broke with long-standing traditions of color use from centuries before these pieces were created. The Impressionists, who were prominent during the 1870s and the 1890s, were the first group of artists to embrace color and color theory. So these two artists we're looking at are a little bit after the Impressionists. So let's look at the work of Leon Knoll. He successfully creates a circular flow based on color placement and value. And we've talked about flow before. Flow is not necessarily where your eye comes into first, second, and third, although I will be talking about that in a minute. But a flow is basically the general direction that the eye is drawn into. And what he does is he does it in a circle, which is an interesting type of flow. Your eye basically comes in at these pure hues right here. We've got these bright, warm, pure colors. Then next it travels up through the red curtain. Now the red curtains are not quite as pure in color as, say, the red and this orange, but it's still relatively pure. And that helps to draw the eye up. Then the eye is brought over, and in this case he's actually using the contrast of value here. These are snow-covered roof lines, and your eye's brought over here and then back over through the other curtains. So we've got this nice flow going on. The other thing I'd like you to notice is that if you look at the buildings in the background, he's basically using yellow and violet. Well, those are complementary colors. And the reason they are staying in the background as he wants them to do is because they're not pure. They are tones of violet and of yellow. So he's keeping those in the background as he wants them. So this is composition-wise, he's actually done a really marvelous job of getting the viewer to look throughout the picture plane, and he's done it in an interesting way. Another artist, Franz Marc, was also known as a colorist. He was one of the early German expressionists. What he does is he floods the picture plane with this warm sea of yellow. And how he gets your eye to move around, because your eye gets tired by seeing a large amount of yellow, is he's actually using the cool colors to direct your eye through the picture plane. Usually artists do it the other way around. They work with a lot of cooler colors and they rely on the warm colors to direct the eye. So what's interesting here is your eye comes in this flood of yellow, and these green they lead you across the picture plane, and the blue and the tail and the mane bring you in. So he's giving you this spiral type of flow, which is so interesting. I feel that if this blue was not here, if this was all red down here, that you wouldn't necessarily be pulled back into the piece. So as simple as the work may look, from the standpoint of sophisticated color use, he's doing a great job. And as always, I ask you, whenever you look up these examples, don't look at them with the eyes of, oh, I love this piece, I hate this piece, I'm indifferent. Please realize that these are good examples of people, in this case, using color to manipulate the viewer's eye. So that's why these are here. Okay, that's it.